Hey, what's up, everybody? Dan Tortora here of Superpowered Pop, and this episode brought to you inside of our Parker Banner, Kent and Wayne studios focuses on the Marvel Cinematic Universe coming to us from Marvel Studios and asking the question, where are we? Plain and simple. Where are we, Marvel? And there's a few meanings to that. We'll discuss it here, like I said, inside of the Parker Banner, Kent and Wayne Studios, PBKW for short. They are your comic book and gaming one-stop shop on 21500 Catawba Ave, Suite A in Cornelius, North Carolina, just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, one of the fastest growing cities in America, and I love the Queen City. You will find just outside of Charlotte at 21500 Catawba Ave, Suite A, once again in Cornelius, North Carolina, Parker, Banner, Kent, and Wayne. PBKW, Parker standing for Peter Parker, Bruce Banner for Banner, Clark Kent for Kent, and Bruce Wayne for, of course, the Batman. So, with that being said, what am I talking about here when I say, where are we? Well, what I'm saying to you is Earth 616 is the main timeline in the comic books. The stuff that I grew up on, I'm in my late 30s, so what I grew up on, that was Earth 616, right? And then there's Earth 838, which is the other one that I know. But there's been this question of, where are we? Are we in Earth 616 in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or are we in Earth 199999? There's 5 nines in that one. Earth 199999. So let's get into this conversation here, and I want to thank Screen Rant for their work on this. Background information and helpful information here. Stating the fact that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is essentially in Earth 616. So it was made clear by Miss Minute's introduction to open the book. So the Marvel Studios, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, an official timeline, that book that Miss Minute says, quote, "I'm Miss Minutes and welcome to the guidebook on the beings and events that make up the universe known as 616, also known as the Sacred Timeline," end quote. We also see Eric Selvig in the first Thor movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe on his board has Earth 616. And when we watch Doctor Strange 2, aka Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, when he is on Earth 838, he speaks to, they refer to his Earth as Earth 616. And of course, that is, like I said, another example of this in the Doctor Strange movies. So in these Doctor Strange movie, Rachel McAdams playing Christine Palmer, and Christine Palmer playing this when she is in these Doctor Strange movies as Christine Palmer, the conversation that she has, Dr. Christine Palmer in Earth 838, is about the designation to Earth, that Doctor Strange that we know, that we've known this whole time, is from Earth 616. Then we meet the Illuminati from 838, and you know, furthermore about 616. So the proof from Selvig, the proof from the Marvel Cinematic Universe official book, the Marvel Studios, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, an official timeline, and what Miss Minutes had to say. Miss Minutes could be lying to us, though. We know that I wouldn't say she's the most trustworthy, but having the Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness with Dr. Christine Palmer, obviously his love interest from Earth 616, the 838 Christine Palmer designates it, and the Illuminati looking back to Earth 616, and then, like, you know, in this book, and then Eric Selvig. So that all points to us being in Earth 616 for the Marvel Cinematic Universe Sacred Timeline. But there was also the conversation that this was not that Earth, that it was a different one. So the MCU started with Iron Man back in 2008, and the shirt that I'm wearing, this gold and black shirt, actually has a bunch of the character. You could see the characters here, all making up the bottom of it, and Iron Man is on the top of this, and this is looking at the first 10 years of this. Iron Man starting off Marvel Studios MCU, essentially. It's not the first movie of the chronological timeline, but it is the first movie that was released back in 2008 from Marvel Studios. And there was an official guide of the Marvel Universe that was released in the same year in 2008 that was entitled Official Handbook of the Marvel Universe A to Z Volume 5. It designated the MCU as Earth 199999 before the movies could say that it wasn't. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse also referred to the MCU as Earth 199999. So here, and again, who made Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse? Sony, so more confusion. So now, if this is Earth 616, this is the issue that we run into. Earth 616 in the comic books had the Fantastic Four. Earth 616 had the X-Men. Earth 616 had Deadpool. Earth 616 had Galactus, had the Silver Surfer, had all the characters that we had come to know that haven't necessarily shown up. Now, in the real world, outside of the comic book world, why couldn't the Marvel Cinematic Universe, aka Earth 616, as it's been designated, why didn't they have the Fantastic Four? Why didn't they have Galactus? Why didn't they have Doctor Doom? Why didn't they have the Silver Surfer? Well, plain and simple, it's because the legal rights were owned by 20th Century Fox. Why didn't they have the X-Men? Because they were owned by 20th Century Fox. Why didn't they have Deadpool? Because they were owned by 20th Century Fox. Why can't they make a movie that has Hulk in the title? Because those rights are with Universal Studios. Why can't they just go willy-nilly with Spider-Man, as we talked about in another video? Because Sony has the rights to the Spider-Verse, Spider-Man, and over 900 characters. Within the last few years, Disney, which owns Marvel Studios, made the decision to purchase a massive portion of 20th Century Fox, renaming it 20th Century Pictures, I think, or 20th Century Studios, something like that, and taking the Fox out of it. In buying a big portion of Fox, they gained the rights to the Fantastic Four, Galactus, and other beyond the Earth beings, celestial beings. So, I mean, they do have the Eternals and the Celestials, but now they have the Fantastic Four. They have Doctor Doom. They have the Silver Surfer and things connected to the Fantastic Four, which I would say are galactic entities, including Galactus. And they own the rights to the X-Men and everything connected to the X-Men, which is obviously like the Brotherhood and so on and so forth. So, and Deadpool. They already got the rights to Daredevil back because a certain amount of time had passed without there being another Daredevil movie. So they got Daredevil and Bullseye and Kingpin and Elektra and all that good stuff, which is why we could see those in the Netflix Marvel creations that are now on Disney Plus, which I predicted, I think 2 years ahead of time, like at least 2 years ahead of time. I said, mark my words, in the next 2 to 3 years, Disney's going to put all their Netflix Marvel shows on Disney Plus, and they're going to look like heroes. And that's what they did. So, Marvel Studios, Marvel Cinematic Universe, is Earth 616. However, we didn't have the Fantastic Four, Silver Surfer, which is why in the Thanos storyline of Infinity War, we saw Hulk fall into the Sanctum Sanctorum where Doctor Strange calls home instead of the Silver Surfer, because they didn't have the rights to the Silver Surfer. And we haven't seen any of the X-Men or Deadpool. So how do you explain this? If this is Earth 616, how does this make any sense? Well, in the comic books, it wouldn't. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, The reality is Disney didn't have the rights to the characters, so that's why they couldn't show up. They didn't have the rights to these Fox. Marvel, when Marvel was going through bankruptcy, they sold a bunch of these characters to Fox. So that's why you didn't have all of them. But how do you tell that story on the big screen? You can't just be like, oh, well, now that we own the rights to all these characters, you have to pretend like they've been here the whole time. Here's the thing. Where have they been? Where are the X-Men? Did Scarlet Witch in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, if it is 616, did she utter no more mutants? And that's why we haven't seen them? Were the Fantastic Four exiled somewhere? But then again, the question would be, well, why didn't Galactus come devour Earth 616? Why didn't the Silver Surfer come as a herald of Galactus? Why didn't any of the other heralds of Galactus come to Earth and say, this would be a tasty treat for you, Galactus? So, and where has been Deadpool this whole time? Because we know that Deadpool likes to put himself out there. He's not really one to hide, and loves to break the fourth wall, so would love to talk with as many as he could, not less. So it's going to be interesting how they tell this story. It would make sense if the MCU was given its own Earth, which essentially the Across the Spider-Verse movie giving it Earth 199999, and then seeing that like in a previous book, that would make perfect sense. But why would Marvel Studios and Disney not want to do that? Because Earth 616 is sacred. Sacred to who? Sacred to the comic book readers. Again, another point we've made in another video we've done here of Superpowered Pop inside of the Parker Banner, Kent, and Wayne studios. If the notion is true that 99% of people that go to comic book movies have no connection to the comic books and no connection to the characters and don't know anything, so there's only 1% of people going to movies are actual comic book fans, that's BS. Well, why is that BS, Dan? What's your argument? Well, thank you for asking. My argument, that's not me talking to myself. That's me trying to go back and forth with you. Let's be clear about that. My grandmother said you can always talk to yourself as long as nobody answers. So why would Earth 616, why would it matter? Why would we have to stay true and say the MCU is in Earth 616? Well, that's because you want to keep the fan base engaged, that you don't want to take a decade and tell them that they weren't in the comic books that they grew up reading. But if that's only 1% of people, who cares? 99% of people would accept it as Earth 199999, right? So why not keep it that way? Because it must make sense. My argument that there's more comic book fans going to see the movies and talk about these movies than there is just simply 1%, with another 99% brain dead people just going to laugh and giggle and see a lot of action. And I don't think that that's fair to call 99% of people basically have a lobotomy and don't have a brain, and you just want them to go to a movie where they can just see shiny things. I don't think that is of the populace. I think we all have a brain, and I think that there needs to be credit given to the comic book enthusiasts and the animated series enthusiasts and the people that read these handbooks and guidebooks and all of this stuff, because it matters to them. Earth 616 or Earth 199999, it wouldn't matter which one if these movies were truly made for 99% of the population. If only 1% reads the comics and 99% don't, it wouldn't matter what Earth you called it, because these people wouldn't care, because they wouldn't know 616. So why are you trying to drive home Disney, Kevin Feige, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Marvel Studios? Why are you trying to drive home that we've been in Earth 616? That's our Tony Stark, Robert Downey Jr. That's our, I don't know how they describe this one because it's been played by 3 different people, but that's our Hulk, Mark Ruffalo, and that's our Chris Hemsworth, Thor. It's our Chris Evans, Captain America. It's our Anthony Mackie, Falcon, who becomes Captain America. It's our Sebastian Stan, Winter Soldier. It's our Scarlett Johansson, Black Widow. It's our Jeremy Renner, Hawkeye. Why would any of this matter? It's our Samuel L. Jackson, Nick Fury. It's our Agent Phil Coulson that we're still waiting to come back. Maybe, please, can he come back? I think I think everybody's waiting for, maybe that's the thing that brings the team back together. Maybe that's the team, maybe that's how we do it. Maybe we get Clark Gregg back to play Agent Phil Coulson, Director Phil Coulson, however you want to call him, Phil Coulson. Maybe we could get him back. I'd love to, and I'm still waiting for Quake. I would still love to see Quake from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. on the big screen. I'm sitting here today saying it makes more sense for the MCU to be Earth 199999 because then you don't have to elaborately create a story of where the Fantastic Four have been, where Galactus and all of these galactic creatures have been larger than Earth creatures and beings. You wouldn't have to describe why we have eternity, but we haven't had Galactus. You wouldn't have to describe where Doctor Doom has been this whole time. You wouldn't have to talk about the X-Men. And folks, if you think the Spider-Verse of over 900 characters is a lot, look at the X-Men. Look at mutants in general and every mutant ever declared in the history of the comic books in that number that can be growing to this day, depending on what the comic books want to do. And Deadpool. It doesn't make sense for the MCU to be in Earth 616. I get it. But again, the designation doesn't matter if the reality is true that 99% of people that go see comic book movies don't care about the comic books. Earth 616 is staying true to the comic book readers. Earth 616 is the sacred timeline. If you're telling us that this is the sacred timeline, then you're telling us that the MCU and the comic books we grew up reading that are set in Earth 616 are the same, but they're not. So now, because you've decided that it's Earth 616, that the MCU is not Earth 199999 or any other designation, now that you've said it's Earth 616, now you have to tell us where all of these characters have been. Now you have to make it make sense. The X-Men, the mutants can, like I said, Scarlet Witch whispering no more mutants. That could be your answer there, but then you have to tell us where the Fantastic Four got trapped. And it's already out there that this Fantastic Four movie is set in a different universe. It's on a different Earth. So in the multiverse, it's not going to be in 616. So, I mean, this is where it gets confusing. And I think, Marvel talking about where are we, it's them finding their identity again. Marvel Studios got really, really good at telling stories. And they spent a decade giving us characters and giving them backstories and putting them in multiple projects and giving many of them solo projects and a multitude of them multiple solo projects. So we got to know Tony Stark, Robert Downey Jr., Iron Man, and so on and so forth with all these characters that I've been talking about. You wouldn't care about Black Widow dying in Avengers 4, aka Endgame. It wouldn't matter to you if you didn't know her through all the movies that she had been in. You wouldn't care about the relationship between her and Hawkeye if you didn't know them from all the movies that they have been in. You wouldn't care about Eric Selvig. You just think he was a scientist if you didn't see him involved in the first Avengers movie and being taken over by Loki and this, that, and the third. It wouldn't matter to you. Captain America, the Winter Soldier, wouldn't matter to you if you didn't see that backstory between him and Captain America over time. The MCU was really good at taking the time to tell the stories, to build the characters, to give us an emotional connection to them, to either like them, dislike them, or lie somewhere in between, so that if, gosh forbid, anything happened to them, it would affect the audience. But see, after making Infinity War and Endgame, and you get those billion-dollar days or billion-dollar projects, you say, I'm at the top of the mountain. So now they've tried to stay at the top of the mountain. They're rushing stories. They're not truly telling stories. They're giving us... I like Moon Knight. But a 6-episode series doesn't emotionally connect me to Moon Knight. It's not enough for someone who likes Moon Knight. And I thought Oscar Isaac did a good job. And I got to meet Oscar Isaac and tell him so. And I thank God very much so for that opportunity to meet somebody who did a great job with a character that I love. But it wasn't enough time. See, that's the thing with the MCU. When I say, where are we? I'm talking about Earth 616 or 199999 or whatever other Earth you want to call it. But I'm also saying, where is Marvel Studios? Because they've lost their way. You got to the top. And now you want to stay there. So you're not telling stories and you're not building characters. So we don't care if something happens to them. People aren't going to care if something happens to Miss Marvel. They're not going to care if something happens to Moon Knight. They're not connected to them. You were connected to the Black Panther, to Chadwick Boseman's T'Challa, to his Black Panther, because you saw him multiple times. You saw him in Black Panther. You saw him in Captain America 3, Captain America Civil War. You saw him in Avengers events. You saw him disappear in Infinity War. You saw him come back in Endgame. That's why in Wakanda Forever, you miss him when you know that he's gone. But if you put him in a 6-part series on Disney Plus and then you killed him in the movies, they're not going to care as much. It's not going to hold the same amount of weight. Marvel has to dedicate itself to the next 10 years. They have to dedicate themselves now to either continuing the stories of people we know and or building the stories of people we don't. But in order to build these new characters in, which they're inevitably doing, in order to build these new characters in, you have to spend the time with them. Thor has had 4 movies and been in Avengers events. Iron Man's had 3 and been in Avengers events. Tom Holland's Spider-Man has had 3 of his own and been in Avengers events. And made his debut in a Captain America movie. You have to build your characters. Your Miss Marvels and your Moon Knights. You have to be willing to build them now. Scarlet Witch, we have a connection to her, but now we're seeking to understand, because now that you have the rights to the X-Men, which you didn't legally have before, which you couldn't tell on the screen, now that you can, is she a mutant? Because the way you created her and her brother Quicksilver in the MCU is not them being mutants. You were utilizing an Infinity Stone. So did the Infinity Stone unlock their mutant gene? You can say that now. You couldn't say it back then. But now you have to tweak these stories. So the question becomes, is the MCU, is Disney prepared to now not start from scratch, but start an entire new era? Remember where you see, this is the problem that a lot of people fall into and businesses fall into. When you forget where you came from, you have no idea where you're going. Marvel Studios hoped that Iron Man worked in 2008. And if it didn't, maybe Marvel Studios would have folded after one movie. But it worked. So then they kept making them. And then they brought the characters together in Avengers. And then they separated them again and told more stories. And then they brought them together in Avengers 2, Avengers Age of Ultron. And then they separated them and told stories. And then they brought them together in Avengers Infinity War, which led us into Avengers Endgame. And then they broke it up again and started telling more stories. That's the thing. They have to be willing to tell these individual stories. And you can have them meet each other and you can have them be around each other. But ultimately, you have to be prepared to tell these stories. And if you don't have a character that you believe you can tell an hour and 40 to 2 hour movie about, then don't use that character. It's plain and simple. If you don't think Moon Knight can do an hour and 45 on the big screen, and you don't think that Ghost Rider can do it, even though I don't think the first Ghost Rider with Nicolas Cage was that bad, if you don't think that they could do it, and obviously Blade's in turmoil right now with Mahershala Ali, if you don't think that that's working, then why don't you just make the Midnight Suns? Why don't you make the Marvel Knights? Take them all and put them all together. Why don't you do this? Why don't you tell those stories Why don't you work on telling those stories? Like you were doing on Netflix. Netflix was building the Marvel Knights. Netflix was building the dark side of Marvel. Daredevil, Elektra, Iron Fist, Luke Cage. Building all those stories. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was giving us Robbie Reyes' Ghost Rider. The Punisher. We know these stories, and now they're on Disney Plus, and now they're considered canon in the MCU, and now they're on the timeline. So if you're going to build something, bring them together. Here's a crazy thought. I'm going to hold it for another show, but I have a villain that could bring all of the Midnight Suns together. And it's somebody we've been waiting for. We'll talk about it in the next episode. MCU, Marvel Studios. Remember, you are storytellers. Stop rushing the story. Stop just trying to crank out stuff and not really letting us know who these people are. Letting us see them, letting us connect with them, letting us care about them. We might have read comic books that had Hawkeye in it, but we have no care or concern for him. But now that we've seen him in his own series, and now that we've seen him in all these other pieces, now we care about Hawkeye. We care about his family. We care about his future. We care about the next Hawkeye. But we wouldn't care about the second Hawkeye if we didn't know anything about the first. So Marvel Studios, if you want to stay on the top of the mountain, you have to understand that after you climb a mountain, you may have to after you climb it, you may have to descend that mountain and climb another one. You made billions of dollars on the Infinity Wars of the world and the Endgames of the world because you spent 10 years building those characters with us. Thanos showed up in piece after piece after piece after piece after piece, even if it was just for a couple seconds. You can't just throw us into Doom. You can't just throw us into Galactus. You have to build your villains. You have to build your heroes. You have to build your anti-heroes. You have to build your stories. You have to build your family. If they started with Avengers, it probably wouldn't made as much money because people would watch it and go, well, I know Iron Man and I know Captain America, but who the hell's that guy and who's that girl and what is this about and why is that and what the heck is coming through space and the Chitauri? I don't know what the hell the Chitauri are. Who cares? You got to start telling stories again, Marvel Studios. And I got one for you for the Midnight Suns. We'll talk about it in the next episode of Superpowered Pop, proudly presented inside of our Parker Banner, Kent, and Wayne studios, PBKW for short. Parker Banner, Kent, and Wayne is your one-stop comic book and gaming shop. You can find them on 21500 Catawba Ave, Suite A in Cornelius, North Carolina. That is just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. Once again, 21500 Catawba Ave, Suite A in Cornelius, North Carolina. For Parker Banner, Kent, and Wayne, that you could find on X, the former Twitter, as well as Instagram by searching PBKW. And you can find them on Facebook, Parker Banner, Kent, and Wayne. You can also search them in any of your search engines to get more information about them online. And of course, you could find Superpowered Pop at Superpowered, that's Powered, Superpowered Pop on Facebook, X, and Instagram. In the meantime, remember, folks, here on Superpowered Pop, and always, wherever you are, whoever you are, to know that your hero truly lies within. We'll talk soon.